starting up, and now we are live on YouTube. Hello YouTube, and welcome to my channel, Super Curious. This is my first ever broadcast. It's live. We are streaming from 2 locations actually. I myself, my name is Linda. I am in my kitchen in Helsinki, Finland. And with me today for a conversation is Dean, and I'll put the camera on you, Dean, and you can introduce yourself.
Hey, what's going on? I'm Dean Meadows. I'm from North Carolina over here in America. I'm the preacher at the Gastonia Church of Christ, and I'm also the co-founder of Apologist Institute, a nonprofit Christian apologetics group. And it is an honor and a pleasure to be here with you guys today. This is the first time that I ever talked to somebody on YouTube live internationally, so it's really cool.
Great, thank you, and I'm so glad that you could make it. I'm so glad that we could schedule this conversation. This is first time live streaming for me. A conversation. I've done a little bit of live streaming on Periscope for the past month, but nothing like this. So this is really, really, really cool, and I'm really, really happy to have you here today.
Cool.
Yeah, and I thought I would just give a little bit of I guess a setup to what this conversation is going to be about. We met on YouTube actually, Dean and I, a month ago about, and we have been having a conversation via email since then, and decided to do this live stream because I would really appreciate it if Dean would give a let us know, talk about who you are. I do not want to do any talking for you.
No,
so
that's
I'll
fine.
So I'll just start by saying what a little bit about who I am and why we thought this conversation would be a good idea from my perspective, and then I'll flip over the camera to you, and you can do the same. So for me, it is like the title of my channel. I am super curious and have been ever since a child, and not in the strange sense of the word, but in that I am very inquisitive and like to learn and like to understand things. Now, the subject that interests both Dean and I, as we have come to understand through our email dialogue, is God. And for me, it's a question of how can we know that God exists? And for that, of course, it's really good to define what we mean by God. We'll probably get into that a little bit later on. For me, I'm not in any way academically, qualified in any area of philosophy or theology or any of set subjects. My qualifications come in that I have been born into this world, and as a child, I was told stories and about Jesus Christ, about the Christian faith. And when I was about 7 years old, I started questioning it quite a bit, and just really questioning it, like, how does it work? How do we know these stories are true? And so on and so forth. So yeah, my qualifications is just a regular girl, 41-year-old lady in Finland who is still questioning these things. And I wanted to talk about these issues with Dean to hopefully clarify the subject for me. So that's my intro on who I am. I hope it's clear to everybody, and I guess people will get to know me through this conversation too. But I'm going to flip over the camera to you now, Dean, so we'll get an insight in you. Thank you. Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Dean. Obviously, my name is Dean Meadows. I was raised in the Methodist Church. Went to church pretty much my whole life, and then at probably 16, started questioning those things. Kind of as I told another interviewer, I read Lee Strobel's Case for Christ, and that kind of for a while settled it for me until after I got back from a deployment with the United States Marine Corps in Iraq in 2007. And as I told you the other day on our preliminary conversation, picked up books like The God Delusion, God is Not Great, Sam Harris's A Letter to a Christian Nation, The End of Faith, things like that, and really had some deep-seated doubts about the Christian worldview, about, as what we're going to talk about whether or not God exists. Is Jesus a real person? Is the resurrection a historical event? Can I even trust the Bible? And so that led me on probably a 2-year journey, starting in Iraq and culminating and stopping somewhere around 2007, 2008, in which I came to the conclusion that this was true, and that the Christian worldview is coherent, and also decided to go into ministry out in Denver, Colorado at the Bear Valley Bible Institute International. Was there for 2 years, then moved to North Carolina, and I've been here for 6 years, being a minister. I'm currently enrolled at Biola University in their master's program for apologetics. So those are the cliff notes, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I mentioned this also when we spoke earlier, that I find it so interesting that we've both read the same book, Richard Dawkins' God Delusion, but it took us in different directions, I guess, and different ways of, I guess.
It's not going to be a problem if I drink coffee on camera, is it?
No, not at all. Drink whatever you feel like.
Okay.
It's all good. Yeah. I guess I would like to start with a question.
Okay.
So we did that. I have to look into my notes. Like I said, this is my first time. Oh yeah, let's just get to a definition of God. And before I actually ask you that, I would like to say a little bit about how I would label my own worldview, just to be, just to be fair. And so I view, yes. So for me, the word atheist is a label, and atheism, in my case, and I guess in lots of other cases too, but for me, the way I see it, it is a response to God claims, or a response to theism. So if we didn't have theism, we wouldn't have atheists. So for me, it's not that I'm of the opinion that there absolutely is no God, or that there could not be no God, or that that I do not want to believe in a God that is proposed. It is simply that I have not confidence in the truth of these God claims. And it's not just about Christianity either. It's about all other God claims that I have come to hear so far. I'm not satisfied with really any of them for me to believe in them. And atheism is about belief, so therefore I am an atheist, because I do not believe. But I do not claim that I know about this. So if anybody would ask me about do I know or not know that God exists, I would just say that I do not know. I do not have that answer. So that would be my kind of where I'm coming from in response to this subject, really. And so because I make no positive claim about a God existing, I would like to know how you define God.
I would say say that the definition of God is the highest conceivable being, or a maximally great being. So that would be the classical definition of all loving, all knowing, all present God, the omnis, I guess you can say, omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, those things. I think that's what, just setting aside the Bible, I think that's how I would classify God. I also think, including the Bible, I think that's what is presented in the text of Old and New Testament. That would be my definition of God: a maximally great being, highest conceivable.
Can I follow up with a question?
Yeah.
That does this being take physical form, and if it does, how?
Okay. I certainly think, given Christianity, I think you do have a situation where God does take form in the presence, or in the likeness of Jesus Christ, certainly bears out. And how, I think he can do that on the basis of his maximally great power.
So he is in physical form as a force, as a power. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, the New Testament bears out that he took form of human flesh. In John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh. So that's kind of the definition of how we see Jesus in the New Testament, or at least God in the New Testament. And certainly he would have power and dominion over, the world as well. So there are other instances, for instance, the crossing of the Red Sea, where God parts the waters. We have an instance where God rains down plagues on Egypt. We have an instance where Elijah calls down fire on a sacrifice, and God sends that. So that's what we see in Scripture in the Old Testament. And in the New Testament, we see, like John said, God taking the form of Jesus Christ and performing miracles as well. So.
Okay, so these like the taking of physical form are documented in the Bible. Is there any other way today that I could, for example, experience the physical properties of God?
Yeah, I think, from Romans chapter 1 states that God has demonstrated himself also by what has been created. So his divine nature and power can be observed, can be seen, can be experienced through what's been created in the world. So I think that's certainly one way in which someone could experience God, is by observing what's been seen. And I think that's what leads into a lot of, as far as natural theology. I think that's where Romans 1, and you pair that with, Thomas Aquinas, and then you see kind of the more modern apologetics about natural theology. I think it stems from Romans chapter 1.
Right. So for me, when I look at the world, you're seeing that as evidence for God, or like God in physical form, I guess. Did I understand that correctly?
Well, I'm saying that you asked, how can I experience, if I'm quoting you correctly, you asked, how can I experience God today with regards to his power and his nature? And one of those things that that his power and nature have been demonstrated in what has been created via Romans 1, or Romans chapter 1. I forget the verse off the top of my head. I think it's around verse 20 to 22, somewhere in that area. So that's one way in which we can know, or we can know, and we can infer to the best explanation that God exists and that his power is real and that expressed as part of his nature.
Right. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that I understood that correctly from your point of view. Because from my point of view, when I look at the world and the physical things around us, I would say or contribute that to nature.
Oh, hold up one second. I lost the line.
Sure.
Sorry.
To nature. Processes.
One second. Let me send a message. I lost the feed for the Periscope, so I'll just direct everybody to.
Right. Yeah, and I'm also wondering because I don't seem to have any viewers on YouTube, so maybe we should have just check that everything is working the way it should be. So if you check your side, I'll go and check with my husband if he can go and have a look if this is actually live streaming on YouTube,
okay,
or if I have some type of setting incorrectly. So I'm just going to leave this on and pop over to see on the other computer if it's live streaming or not. Hey everybody, is anybody live streaming this or watching the live stream on YouTube right now, or trying to? It's a YouTube channel called Super Curious, capital S UPER space capital C. Maybe I should shut off the sound. Capital C. I don't know how to spell curious. Oh man. CUROUS. Super Curious is his channel. Is it live streaming is the question. JT, I see you're on. Can you see it? You see it. Oh, so it is live streaming. Oh, so I've got one
Periscope.
So, okay, so we've got one viewer. My name is Linda. Well, then we know that it's live streaming right now. I wonder if we should do something to get people on.
I'm going to put on my Facebook that everyone's going to go to your Periscope handle.
Okay. Yeah. Because that seems to be working. People are there.
Mine's not working.
Oh, okay. Well, sure, do that. And yeah, I'm thinking that we'll just let this roll this way this time. I'm sure we're going to have great conversations in the future again. This is kind of like a practice run, I guess. And it's still going to record this on YouTube.
No,
so maybe
fine.
we can make something out of it and then upload it at a later date.
And you can edit that as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's just keep rolling. I've let everybody know where they can find the conversation on your handle. So you were saying before we got you were talking about when you look at the world, it's as far as nature. Go ahead and continue down that line.
Right. Yes. So I view the world as it exists. As far as I have come to understand it, there are natural processes that have made the world, our planet, for example, the way it is. And I'm wondering if maybe, because it almost sounds when you describe God that could be interchangeable with nature, but is that what you think? I guess.
No, I wouldn't say that God is interchangeable with nature. because even with regards to what we see in nature, even if I were to grant the overall hypothesis of Darwinian evolution, which I I don't completely grant that, but that's a conversation for a second time.
Mhm.
Darwinian evolution, on its basis, would describe the survival of the fittest, right? But it wouldn't express the arrival of the fittest. And what I mean by that is, even if Darwinian evolution is true, um, you still have to have an explanation for um, the coming into being of the universe. And I think that the Christian worldview uh, gives the best and potentially the most coherent explanation for that in the Kalam cosmological argument put forth by William Lane Craig in the mid 80s.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that, the Kalam cosmological argument. To me, it sounds quite like it's a philosophical argument. It has.
It is.
And
want,
like I said, I don't have a degree in philosophy, so I wouldn't want to go that route or argue that with you, I guess, at all. Or maybe at a later date when I get a chance to look into it more. But I just wanted to say that I'm familiar with it. I've heard of it. But on the question of that we need to have an explanation, like even if, like you said, Darwinian evolution would be true, we would need an explanation for the, I guess, for the, like how life came to be.
Well, just the beginning of the universe in general.
Right.
Because you can't. I don't necessarily see how you can have Darwinian evolution on Earth if you don't have Earth, and you can't have Earth without a universe. And so, even at the beginning, even at the nexus or the beginning of the universe, still needs a explanation before you even get to macroevolution and what Darwin put forth.
Yeah, exactly, and I completely agree with that. That we do need an explanation. I'm just wondering about how to go about investigating that explanation.
Yeah.
But for me, it becomes a bit of a leap to say God. And
okay.
even if, and so, like to put it the other way, like you say, even if Darwinian evolution would be true, in my mind, even if God would be true, how do we explain God? And can we then explain God? How did God do it is my question.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think that's, the branch known as theology, the science of investigating God, traditionally known as the queen of the sciences, right? Is okay. Yeah, how did God do this, or what implications from the universe can we derive that helps us investigate, God at all? I think that's a great question. But I just want to clarify one small point. Mm-hmm. I'm not appealing to the God of the gaps. I'm not appealing to that. Mm-hmm. I think we all are familiar with the ancient Norse, gods of Thor and Odin, that when it used to lightning, they used to say, "Oh, well, the gods are angry," or when it used to rain, say, "Oh, well, the gods are sad," and that's because there was a gap in their knowledge. So where there was a gap in their knowledge, they substitute God. I just want to clarify and make note so that we can have a healthy dialogue. I'm not appealing to God of the gaps. I'm saying based on the current scientific evidence that's accepted by the scientific community, I think that inference to the best explanation for the beginning of the universe is not nature in and of itself, but I think you have to have a cause there that's outside of the universe. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I guess it's kind of interesting because I also believe there must be some kind of how, I don't know if cause is the right word again, because I feel, or I don't know enough about the origins of the universe to say that like, I don't know if I think my language breaks down in a
Mhm.
sense, that there must be a how this happened,
Yeah.
how the universe came to be. How should I ask this again? Like,
You can just repeat it how you asked it before.
how do we get to God?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the way that we get to God is you can do deductive reasoning as laid out in the Kalam, where you say if A and B is true, then it must follow that C is true. I think that you can do even some inductive reasoning as well. And I think the way that you would get to God is maybe the following way, and we don't have to go into the intricacies of the argument, but I'll lay out the argument just to kind of as an example, if that's okay. So,
Sure.
so the Kalam cosmological argument would say that whatever begins to exist must have a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. And so if the first two lines of reasoning hold to be true, then regardless of what I might think about it or what I may know or not know about it, it necessarily follows that the third line of reasoning is true, which is the universe has a cause. And so the way that we would navigate that is to say, okay, well, is the first premise true? Is it true that whatever begins to exist has a cause? Yes or no? Okay. Did the universe begin to exist? Okay. We look at the scientific data and we say, okay, yes or no. And then that comes to our conclusion. So if the first two are true, then the third follows that it does have a cause. And then we can take, based upon the principles of what we've seen, okay, well, what's the nature of that cause? And I think that's a solid way, using the scientific data paired with some theological principles in which we would be able to arrive at God.
But we came to the fact that there within the Kalam cosmological argument that there necessarily is a God. If we're following that logic, that there necessarily is a cause. But how do we get from that the cause is God?
Okay.
How does he put that in there? Is my question.
Yeah. No. So when we look at that, we say since based upon Einstein's theory of relativity, what we see is that time, space, and matter all came to being at what is called a singularity. And so, therefore, whatever any type of cause must have a efficient effect, which means, for instance, this computer that I'm touching right now, we would both agree that the computer did not create itself, right? Because computers just don't pop into being out of nothing. Something, an efficient cause, human, put the pieces together there. So the way in which we would arrive at God on the Kalam cosmological argument is we would look and we say, okay, the universe is made up of time, space, and matter, right? And so time, space, and matter, just like the computer, wouldn't be able to create itself. Therefore, whatever created the universe would have to be timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and powerful. And that right there is the core definition classically of God. And I would even say that that cause would be personal, because before the singularity, there are no initial laws, initial operating laws by which even physics can be done. So it has to be either initial operating conditions or a choice. So that's, I think, a good way in which you could take the Kalam cosmological argument and, using those principles, derive the cause to being a God or God.
All right. There was quite a lot of stuff there.
Sorry.
I need to go one step at a time. I am not physicist, so I dare not attempt Big Bang theory and the I don't even know how many milliseconds after at the moment, like what the in short, I think that's a problem our physicists are in fact working on, and that Einstein and his theory of relativity has given us a wonderful continuing contribution to the continuing investigation of how our universe came to be. Would you maybe just, if we stop it, because you brought up Einstein, and I'm wondering, do you think that science will find evidence for God at some point? If science would find the origins of our universe in a satisfactory way, if it would be possible for us to dig out that evidence, do you think God would be exposed, so to speak?
To dig out what evidence, I guess, is what I'm asking.
I guess I'm unclear. You were saying that due to Einstein's theory of relativity, that certain things, that time, for example, came to be at the I'm probably using the wrong words now, but just bear with me, at the beginning of the universe. And all right, you used the word singularity. To that, I'm saying I'm not a physicist, so I wouldn't know what we would call the very, very moments prior to the time of the Big Bang that we can kind of trace back. Like it's like the very moment of when our universe seems to have come to being, that we don't really know that much. And my question, I guess, is if we were able to, through the scientific method, to peer back even further than we are now, do you think God would that we would find God there, the God that you have defined for us, or what do you think we would find?
No, and that's an interesting question. I don't know what we would find if we were able to peer back past what's called Planck time, which is the earliest point. It's the point in which, on the Big Bang model, everything begins to break down. But I also think that this isn't a an argument to where you could use the scientific method, because the scientific method deals with what's in nature, whereas God is obviously a spiritual being. So you couldn't use a process that tests natural things to get directly to a spiritual thing. So therefore, it would be a deductive argument or inference to the best explanation to God. I don't necessarily know that it'd be one day that as they uncover quantum gravity, one day God's going to necessarily pop out of behind a mountain, Adam, and say, "Hi guys, how you doing?" Right. So I think that's to my best ability to describe it. I think that the argument for the existence of God is an inference to the best explanation, not necessarily a let's put some stuff in a test tube and see if we can find God in a test tube.
Right. But what I'm hearing then now is that God is the best supernatural explanation.
I think he's just the best. I think he's the best explanation in general. Whether that's, I think when you look at what we can derive from the scientific evidence with regards to the beginning of the universe, that a God is the best explanation for what we see.
Yeah, but if we don't know scientifically how the universe came to be, how can then God be the best scientific explanation?
Well, I think I would probably push back just a little bit and say that the Big Bang model is probably the most widely accepted model amongst cosmologists. I mean, obviously there are other models that are out there, but as far as what we have right now on the books, the Big Bang model is the one that right now seems to be the tops on the list of those who study the universe as far as the best explanation right now of how the universe came to be. So in that regard, I think when you look at that model, you have to ask the question, what's the best explanation for the universe coming into existence, coming into being? And I think what science would show, and go back to the computer analogy, I think what science would show is that being does not come from non-being. Being can only come from being. So if you have time, space, and matter coming into being at a singularity, then you have to ask the question, all right, what's the best explanation on the basis of the evidence for this taking place?
Right, but how do you get God into that? Sorry for interrupting.
No, because you can derive from the conclusion that the universe has a cause. Okay, so what's the best? Who's the best culprit, or what's the best culprit for being the cause? And I don't necessarily know that nothing is the answer, because there are really two options.
Can I? Sorry for interrupting, but isn't also that we just don't know might be the answer? That the option to God isn't necessarily just nothing, but that we don't know, that we have yet to discover what the force, what has created this universe. Like, how do you know that it's the God that you defined in the beginning? How do you get those characteristics?
Yeah, well, I think we can derive that from the causal principle. You know, that from nothing comes nothing, and
I agree with that pretty much.
Yeah,
I think.
So from being comes being, and so you know, I think one of the things that we look at is there. I mean, I think there are. And I give you that point. I think there could be, you know, I think there is a possibility of potentially three answers, but you'd be hard pressed, I think, to look at the evidence with regards to the beginning of the universe and come to the conclusion that that evidence is poor. I think the evidence for the beginning of the universe is pretty solid. So you have two options. And I think it's the options that are laid on the table. You can infer. You can say, okay, well, you have a cause that's timeless, spaceless, immaterial, personal, all powerful, or you can say, well, the universe popped into existence out of nothing, which is interesting because if the universe popped into existence out of nothing, then why doesn't anything or everything pop into existence out of nothing? Or you have the third option where you can say, well, I'm just, you know, I see the evidence over here and I have these options and I can be agnostic about it and just say, well, I don't necessarily know that that's enough evidence to convince me.
For me personally, it would probably be the last one that you mentioned, that I don't have enough evidence and so therefore I don't know. I'm interested to know how, and I know it sounds like I'm beating the the question a bit, but yeah, I really find that interesting, is how you have come to the realization, or to the or is it that it is a belief? It is a how do you know it's God, or how do you believe that it's God? What has convinced you that would be the one answer to?
And I don't mean to beat a dead horse either.
That was the
sorry for those
saying I was going for.
Sorry for those I don't want to offend anybody who might be an animal rights advocate. So I'll say bush because bushes don't have feet. So I don't mean to beat the same bush again, but I mean, if you look at the argument that's laid on the table, you know, if the universe did have a cause and the universe doesn't create itself, and the universe is made up of time, space, and matter, then whatever is the root cause of those things has to be timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and powerful. And for me, I think that's the core definition of a God. I'm not necessarily saying that it's the Christian God, but it's a God. I think you have some work to do. You can't just say, I don't think on that premise you can automatically do the Christian God. I think you can say a God. I think you've got a little bit more work to do to say that it's He's God, because I think there are the other steps involved in that. But would you agree? I mean, let me ask you a question if I can.
Yes, please.
Would you agree that life cannot come from non-life?
On that question, I would say that I don't know. As far as what I've read and the parts that I've understood of it, life, and it's kind of like, how do you define life and non-life?
Let's just
go with of different molecules and chemicals, and you need certain types of a certain type of circumstance around it.
Goldilocks.
For me, it's a mystery. It's It's nothing that I would claim to know. So I wouldn't be able to agree or even disagree. For me, it's that I don't know. I think that's also something we're kind of working on to get a clearer picture on it. Of course, it would be great if we would be able to take matter that isn't alive, and I feel so sorry for all the biologists listening, and they're going like, oh, Linda. But and then maybe how to, and I know that there were some experiments done, and evolution is really, really slow. So yeah, I just have to say that I don't know.
Okay, that's fair. Let me ask you maybe a more important question, if you don't mind. I don't want to hog your interview. If you've got
I've been asking you heaps of questions, so please feel free to ask.
You said kind of in the beginning, if I remember correctly, that there hasn't really been any argument to satisfy the belief in theism. So I guess my question would be, what would satisfy you in relation to God's existence, or I guess what would you personally need to go from atheism, theism? What's something that what would it be for Linda to say, you know what, that's enough for me to move the goalposts from here to here?
Yeah, I get the question, and for me, it would be, I guess, a change of worldview. Yeah, that for me, I see we've got these labels and stuff, and before I am an atheist, that is like a response to a certain claim or to theism, I would say that I am a skeptic, an investigator, and so I guess for me to call myself a theist, to believe in a God, would be to say that I do not need evidence, that I hold these beliefs to be true on basis of something that I guess I feel, or that I make that leap, that it is belief, and that I do not need it to be evidenced.
Okay.
That it's something that I trust outside of the things that I experience and know and intellectually have read. Is that
so So I'm interested in that answer. I'm really interested in that answer because, and I don't want to categorize what you're saying, but are you suggesting that to go from the worldview that you hold would be to accept it on a basis of, let me ask it this way. Do you think that theists accept the proposition that God exists without evidence for God's existence? Are you saying that in order to fall into being a Christian, it's a matter of simply blind faith, regardless of what?
Short answer, yes. That's how I get there. That's how I think. I wouldn't know about all theists. I wouldn't want to put words in anybody else's mouth or say anything about that. But yes, I do think my answer does reflect what I think theism is and what it requires. Yes.
Okay.
To be honest, yes.
So then in order to get you, or not to get you, but in order for you personally to move from atheism to theism, you think that you would have to give up evidence in order to be a Christian?
I don't know, give up evidence.
Yeah,
not necessarily, because I'm in our conversation,
okay.
It seems like we kind of accept a lot of the same things to be reality. We just ascribe them to different things, and I am unwilling to ascribe them. Is that the right word? To something that I feel I would have to kind of like make up or construct in order to have it fit. That from my point of view, it's the that I don't know.
Okay.
I don't have the answers yet, and we're working on it.
Okay. So, if, let's say, 1905 is kind of when 1905, 1915 is when Einstein had his special and general theories of relativity published. I guess my question is, if the Big Bang model holds, that time, space, matter occurred at a specific singularity in time past, and we know that things don't cause themselves to exist, like this computer, like me, Dean, I didn't cause myself to exist. And it's understood that the universe didn't cause itself to exist, or it didn't pop into existence out of nothing. Why not accept the premise that there is a cause that is timeless, spaceless, and immaterial?
The straight answer to that for me would be it's the attributes that you attach to it. That I feel I have no way of knowing right now that it is timeless, and especially personal, that it would have a agenda or a plan. I just cannot know that. So that would be the straight answer to that. And also, you mentioned the computer a couple of times, and to me, I agree that the computer doesn't pop into existence, and we know through our world it has actually a really natural cause, which is that humans have learned how to create tools and create ultimately computers as well. So that's what we do. To me, that's a natural cause. When it comes to the popping into existence of the universe, again, I smile when I say that, because I don't know if we can make that, we can say it like that with a high level of confidence. These are things that I guess are still being worked out. And I've read Lawrence Krauss, The Universe from Nothing, but there's a quite clear idea about what that nothing is, and it's not completely nothing either. But I have yet to understand that would be accepted as the one and only model. And I hope I'm not insulting Lawrence Krauss or the physicists of the world. Like I said, I'm not a physicist. I do not claim to understand the work, especially leading edge work that is being done. I read it like popular science as somebody who is interested.
Mm-hmm.
But what I have understood from that is that the question could potentially be worked out, and that I'm really interested to follow Lawrence Krauss's work, and well, that's the physicist I'm thinking of right now, just because of that book. But there are lots of physicists working on the issue at the moment.
Yeah, no, and I respect Dr. Krauss and his work. I've got his book right here on the shelf about a universe from nothing, and and that's a whole different, I guess, conversation, because I think Krauss manipulates the term nothing to fit his premise. But I would go ahead and I would recommend, just in and I'll have to go back and read it too, in the Youth of the Lincoln Theorem 2012, that states that any universe on classical space-time that's been in expansion throughout the majority of its history has to have a beginning. And I think that is...
Sorry, what was that? I didn't get the beginning.
The Bohr-Guth-Vilenkin theorem.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that.
And what basically they've said is, what they've said is that any universe with general circumstances, low entropy, that's been expanding throughout its majority of its existence has to have a beginning. And so, I mean, that would apply to a vast majority of, to see a model, and that's on it. I've yet to see a model that doesn't encounter those problems of the beginning of the universe that Bohr or Guth and Vilenkin have presented. So I think that's just something to look at. So I've got I've been talking a bunch. You go ahead and ask a question.
I just had a look at the time. It's 6 now. I don't know at what time we actually here in Finland. So that must be 11 a.m. where you are. We previously spoke about going for an hour. I'm not exactly sure when we started, because we had I had the technical difficulties in the beginning.
I think we about 10 minutes on our hour from what I've got.
Well, great. Good. But shall we move on to maybe something different? We can come back to this at a later stage.
No, that's fine.
Because I need to read myself up on Lawrence Krauss as well, and I would like to look into the Kalam cosmological argument once again and have a look at that, and the other things you mentioned too, because it's really interesting stuff. So let me have a look. If you have a question, go right ahead. I'm going to look into my notes for a sec to see what I thought before this conversation started.
Yeah, no, go ahead and look into your notes, and we'll just pick up from wherever your notes are. And I'll shoot a text message real quick.
Right. Be my guest. Okay. I don't know, we covered quite a bit here. Yeah, no, I don't really have any clear-cut answers. This was all about, yeah, how we come to believe what we believe, and so on, and about my definition of atheism, which I touched already, and your definition of God. That was my the most interesting bit for me today, just to have somewhere to start.
Yeah.
Then with, I guess I would like to know also how you came to believe that that's true. And I think I asked that several times. So now just thinking back on what we've spoken about. Yes?
Just a brief comment. Like, the Kalam isn't the only, I hope I don't present that as the only way or only reason why I came to believe. I think we can build, personally, I think people can build what I call a cumulative case for why God exists. So it's not just one argument. So even, for instance, if the Kalam argument failed and fails miserably and goes down, into the ash heap of history, I still think that there are other good arguments for the existence of God. So I just want to make sure that's something that's clear as well.
Yeah, that's clear. I did understand that we just now hit the one thing, and I think that's kind of a nice way to continue. Also, that we take one thing at a time and see where we wind up. I found it interesting that we do agree on quite a bit of things. That the differences, I guess, are also quite clear, and I find that interesting. I would love to continue on the conversation. And if you like, I would love to continue on other subjects too, like we spoke yesterday about possibly entering in on morality, and can we humans be moral without a God? To me, that sentence even is really interesting. I would like to kind of break that down and see what we think about that, and again, see where we agree and where we possibly disagree.
No, I would love to do that. I don't know if we have enough time here and now to start. But one thing I think I can, hopefully I can take the liberty to speak for you here, is that the reason that we're having this conversation is to investigate, the claims of, the worldviews that we both hold, but also to show people that are live, that are on YouTube, that are on Periscope, or however else they're getting this, is that, we live in a world right now where it seems, at least over here in my country, I don't know how it is in Finland, where we just have lost the ability to communicate with one another when we have differences, and to have a genuine conversation about those differences. And even if we don't agree ultimately at the end of the day, that there can still be a modicum of respect and dignity towards the other person that's shown. And so I think, I hope it's twofold. I hope that we raise and answer questions that people are asking, tough questions of both my worldview and your worldview, but at the same time, people come away from our conversation and say, you know what, those two people, they didn't necessarily respect it.
Just towards the end, the sound was breaking up a little bit.
I hope that at the end of the day, people can look at our conversation and say, they might not agree, but they definitely respect each other.
Yeah. No, I love the way you said that, and that is exactly how I feel as well. Because also, so that we can learn from each other, we need to communicate with each other, and also to live in the same world, to share the same world. I think we definitely need respect and open communication.
No doubt.
So yeah, I'm really, really thankful for this conversation. I'm thinking we'll wrap it up for today, and hopefully next time we meet, we were talking about doing it once monthly, possibly. Maybe we'll do it earlier. I don't know. Let's communicate via email. But I'll get my YouTube channel sorted with more graphics and information. This was rushed on my part. It was a fail in my technical abilities. Yeah, but we've got time. I think this was a wonderful beginning. You know, I've also been nervous, and it's like stuff like that. But you've been a really, really good sport about everything. I would like to thank you for wanting to continue the conversation that I started behaving quite badly in the comment section on YouTube.
Right.
I have apologized to you profusely about, and I learned my lesson, and I think I'm better for it. So I thank you for that.
The only request that I'll have is that because you've apologized for it profusely, is that from this point forward you don't apologize for it anymore.
Okay.
You've got enough to last a lifetime. All right, don't worry.
Fair enough. Yeah, we've got to move on, and onward. You're such a good sport, and thank you so much for joining me here today. Yeah, let's be in contact, and yeah, the next one will be technically a lot more better, and I hope we have more great conversations to come and more interesting stuff.
Sounds good.
Good. Thank you so much, Dean.
All right.
And thank you everybody who did see this this broadcast. And yeah, we'll be editing it if it's possible technically, and possibly uploading that to my channel. And Dean will also have the possibility to use the material as well wherever you see fit. I reckon this should be a fair exchange. So look forward to that, and catch you guys next time, right? To all the viewers, and thank you again, Dean.
Hey, no problem. Take care.
Take care.